Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our next session on Europe's new food equation. My name is Bartosz Brzeziński, and I cover agri-food-related topics at POLITICO. When Brussels talks about competitiveness and security, the focus is often on defense, energy, or tech. But food belongs on that list too, or at least so I hear whenever I talk to people here in Brussels. The war in Ukraine, climate shocks, and farmers' protests have shown just how fragile the food system can be. This session comes as the European Commission has just proposed its vision for the EU's farm budget after 2027. Agriculture Commissioner Christoph Hansen insists it's not a budget cut, and that it strengthens competitiveness and keeps climate ambition intact. Let's test that claim. Please welcome our panelists. Starting from on my left, Dacian Ciolos, former European Commission for Agriculture, former MEP with the Liberal Group, and former Prime Minister of Romania. Next to him, we have Marco Contiero from Greenpeace. He's the EU Agriculture Policy Director. And to his left, Jens Hartmann, Head of Europe, Middle East, and Africa at Bayer Crop Science. The EU is rewriting its farm policy for after 2027. Commissioner Hansen insists this new vision will strengthen competitiveness without sacrificing environmental or social ambition. Mr. Ciolos, from your perspective, will Hansen's vision actually get Europe there, or is Brussels moving in the wrong direction?
No, the vision of Commissioner Hansen is a good one. The problem is that there is a difference between the statements in the Commission and the content of the legislative proposals. With the legislative proposals on MFF package, including agriculture, in my opinion, this is the beginning of the end of a common agricultural policy. A sectoral common agricultural policy will be transformed in a sectoral program, among others, in the budget. And agriculture, maybe with the fishery policy, are the only one connected on the meantime to the market and the social and environmental objectives that we have. So if we separate these two, we risk to have a disturbance on the market, and we risk to lose a lot of farmers. And you know, in agriculture, once you lose some farmers, they will not come back. This is the specificity to work with natural resources. So for me, this is the risk that I don't see this vision that the Commissioner Hansen presented in the springtime. I don't see this translated in the budgetary proposal, having a combination of about our objective to produce food, to produce non-food agricultural production, because agriculture can contribute also to energy production, to some bioeconomy industries, and also to combine this objective to increase competitiveness of our agriculture, the resilience, economic resilience of our agriculture, and to have a good management of natural resources, because the soil, the water, the biodiversity are not only public goods, but they are also factors of production for our farmers. And this vision, it's absent from the proposal when you put in the same package all the budget, and to leave the responsibility, the common European responsibility, to leave it to the member states to decide how they will share this money. You imagine what should happen on the market if one farmer is paid in a certain level, and in another member state the government decides to pay less or to pay more, and even to add some state aid. We risk to have big disturbance on the market just because this political decision to deal with the budget.
So if you used to be in Hansen's shoes, if you were still commissioner today, what would you do differently? Short answer.
I would connect agriculture with other policies, with trade policy, with environmental and climate change policy, with energy policy, having a different system to pay the farmers, more to what they are doing, so to rethink the income of farmers related to what they sell on the market and the service that they provide, and to transform what we have today, direct payments, in more incentive approach, and to also give the dignity to the farmers, because now the perception in the society is that the direct payments are a social support for them, which is not right. But we need more clarity on what we use, the way we use this budget, and also I would think to an investment policy, maybe connected to competitiveness fund and other funds, in order to stimulate farmers to invest in digitalization, in integrating new technologies, more in harmony with good management of natural resources, and also to adapt our trade policy and trade agreements to this objective, long-term objective to ensure strategic autonomy for some key products.
Marco, I saw you maybe nodding along a bit. Do you see this new proposal, this new common agricultural policy proposal for after 2027? Where is the climate ambition? Where is the environmental ambition in it?
Indeed, I have to say I almost could repeat your speech. There are some interesting policy options chosen by the Commission. This proposal is clearly more targeted than the one that we currently have. We do see this attempt to have a better focus on farmers who need the most support. There are interesting, also from an environmental point of view, provisions in terms of, for instance, the aspects of allowing farmers to come out with transition plans and then receiving support for that. However, the main concern, the main problem is that because of the way in which the budget has been, the cap, the part of the budget that will be devoted to cap, a bit less than 300 billion, it has been structured. Eventually, we're going to have a big part given to farmers as today as an hectare-based payment, irrespective of what farmers do. And then the remaining, it depends how much member states will use, but the remaining 20% more or less will have to be divided between agro-environmental policy decisions, investment support, support for areas of natural constraints, knowledge and innovation spreading, etc., etc. So many different, extremely important, mandatory measures that member states are supposed to take will have to just manage a very tiny part of the budget. And today, in the cap that is actually implemented, 32% of the budget is devoted to environmental payments, whether in the first pillar with eco schemes and the second pillar with agri-environmental measures. De facto, it is very possible that once this cap is implemented, if it stays as it is, we're going to see disappearing the whole budget dedicated today to environmental action. And this would be a disaster, clearly.
Jens, you represent one of the biggest companies involved in the agricultural sector, Bayer. When you look at this proposal from a kind of business side, will farmers become more competitive thanks to the policies being proposed by Brussels?
Yeah, a good question, Bartosz. The way we're looking at it, and going perhaps half a step back, how you introduced the discussion, talking about resilience in the ag sector. No? And we have all experienced how fragile the whole food system is here. We saw it, or we see it with climate change, then we saw geopolitical, and now trade. Now, how do we address this? There are two aspects to it. The one is through innovation, driving innovation in agriculture. The other one is through policy and frameworks. Now, looking at innovation, and that brings then the bridge back to CAP and the way it's supposed to be, is on the one hand side, farmers need stability. No? They need also, to a certain extent, the assurance with regard to the business they're in, that it's remaining a viable, a professional, and a profitable business going forward. On the other hand side, farmers also need, and we are proposing very much an incentivization scheme towards innovation. So how can we ensure that farmers are recognized and appreciated for driving sustainable agriculture going forward with new tools? And last but not least, which is also very, very important, is that if you look at CAP, you need to ensure that you've got place for additional revenue streams. And I think, Bartosz, you mentioned that, Marco, you talked about that as well. And we look at it, for example, through carbon farming. To what extent do we incentivize farmers opening up additional revenue streams to keep their profession, to keep agriculture a profitable business going forward? So that's a little bit how we would look at it, but most importantly really is the recognition and incentivization towards innovation, which drives resilience in agriculture, and that's innovation across all technologies, ultimately. No? It's seeds, it's new breeding technologies, it's crop protection, it's biologics, it's the entire toolbox.
You've all touched upon this theme of resilience, Mr. Czelos. What's the single biggest vulnerability in the European food system? And is the Commission addressing it effectively?
There are several, in my opinion. There are vulnerabilities related to the market, to the unpredictability of market for reasons connected to climate change. This is more and more present on the spot, and not only in some regions, but all across Europe, droughts or floods or fires and so on. So this is a big problem to deal with, and we see that the private insurance company don't cover all these risks. So we should imagine a system combining what private sector can provide with what we can do with public money. Then it's a question of generational renewable. This is a big risk, in my opinion, for European agriculture, because European farmers are more and more older, and we have difficulties to find young farmers to come in this activity, also because of unpredictability in this activity. Unpredictability connected to the market, but also lack of vision and visibility about how the income can be built for farmers. And this is why I think before to stimulate young farmers to come, we should deal with the way that we ensure a stable and predictable income for farmers related to the market, and also related to the payments of public goods. And we should create new markets of carbon absorption, of biodiversity maintaining, of management of the landscape in some area, which is very important. All these activities, or all these goods, public goods, are connected to activity of farmers together with the production of food. And as I mentioned, we don't discuss enough about bioeconomy, about non-food agriculture production. We have a lot of commitment in the circular economy in Europe, and agriculture can contribute to them, but we have to be clear how we will pay this for farmers, and also energy production and so on. So this is a large approach that we have to have about farmers in order to give predictability.
Marco, do you find that there is enough recognition of the investment needs in these different challenges when you talk to policymakers, lawmakers?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think there is enough, even in society, but also in the political circle here in Brussels, commitment and understanding of the problems that we're facing when discussing about climate change. We do see, finally, I would say, in Europe as well now, since a few years, the real impact of climate change. But if you look at some figures, the EA came out with the calculations on this Monday and also before. We have seen, first of all, the problem related to the lack of implementation of environmental legislation in Europe cost, Commissioner Roosevelt told us, 180 billion a year. The cost of implementing is 122, if I'm not mistaken, billion, which means that Europe, if it invests into implementing environmental legislation, would, for every 10 euros, get 15 euros in avoided costs. That's a pretty good economic. But when it comes only and exclusively to climate change, we've seen in the 80s, we were facing weather events imposing cost of 8.5 billion a year. As of 2022, we are talking about 45 to 48 billion every single year, and it's only going to be up. That's why I go back to the CAP, for example. And what my colleagues have said, we need to provide incentives to farmers and landowners to to change their practices, and it's not something easy. It requires convincing, it requires encouragement, it requires money. We cannot provide incentives without providing money for that transition that we ask businesses to do. We have to provide them a vision, and we have to provide them the tools to get to that vision. I don't think that policies such as the CAP or a lot of the omnibus deregulation that we are witnessing in these very weeks in Brussels is going in that direction.
Well, that's something that even Commissioner Hansen talks about, needing to tap into private investment. But coming back to resilience, Jens, from the industry side, what are some of the most concrete innovations or solutions that you can bring to increase that resilience? Carbon farming seems to always be a discussion that will happen someday, but first we have to address.
Yeah, absolutely. And carbon farming is not necessarily addressing the resilience in agriculture. No? The resilience in ag addressing climate change is really around new breeding techniques. How do you make your crops heat resistant, drought resistant, water resistant? It's about how do you allow access to new modern technologies, even in the crop protection sector. If you look at Europe in the last 5 years, we haven't seen any new molecules being registered in the marketplace. To the contrary, I think the industry overall lost 80 or so products. So it's that combination of innovation which drives ultimately the resilience and which addresses climate change, together with, and you talked earlier about competitiveness. Now, what does farmers in Europe really concern from a competition point of view? Also, when you look at agricultural resilience, it's the access or the speed of access to new technologies. And there we come to Omnibus, and there we come to the regulatory framework and the element of, or the angle of how can we have a more efficient regulatory system to maintain that competitiveness in Europe compared to other geographies by farmers just having timely access to new technologies. No? And then last but not least, in terms of challenges, what you asked to ag-food systems, I completely agree to Bartosz, what you are saying. The aging farming population is a massive challenge in Europe. And why doesn't the younger generation get more into farming? It's on the one hand side, of course, that predictability element. To what extent do I enter a sector which gives me midterm solid and forecastable financial returns? And at the same time also the entire element of to what extent is agriculture and to what extent are farmers actually recognized in society. And we just need to remember the farmer protests we had here. It was 2 years ago or so. It was a lot about, is farming or are farmers actually recognized as a very, very important and strong contributor to food security in Europe. So that would be a little bit my take and my angle to it.
Well, you alluded to the slow approvals of some of these new technologies. Access to new technologies is an issue. If approvals were faster, what's one innovation that farmers could tap into tomorrow?
Well, it's probably not a matter of tomorrow, but it's in general access to new crop protection products, access to biologics, access to seeds, to better genetics who have climate resilience traits in there. It's the entire portfolio of a toolbox which a farmer needs to address resilience in agriculture.
Mr. Challis, do you think the Commission is doing enough to provide that? I mean, they also talk about this access to new technologies, new genomic techniques, new pesticides. Do you find that policymakers today are giving enough of a toolbox to farmers?
I don't think it's so much the Commission fault. It's more about our decisional process, sensitivities of some subject in some areas of society. Some member states are more open than others to that, and this is why we have some blockages in some political debates. And I think we need we need the debates, open debates and discussion about that, because sometimes we deal with some prejudgments on NGTs, for example. I remember we had a lot of discussion connected this with GMO, but we have some new technologies today which are not so much understood and discussed in the society, because finally, you know, the politicians are very sensitive to the signals coming from the society. And we have, in the last decades, more and more a short-term political approach, because the politicians are thinking to the next elections, and instead to project a sector to the future, they are dealing or not with some sensitive subject, depending on how close the discussion is to the elections and how the people will react. And this is one of the reasons why we have difficulties to take strategical decision and to implement a vision. We are good to elaborate a vision on the paper, but then it's more difficult to implement this. And the farmers pay the price.
Marco, you hear technologies, you hear new molecules. Where do you draw the line? Where does innovation fit the sustainability vision that you from Greenpeace advocate, and where is it going? Where is it crossing the line?
Yeah, I mean, you use the right verb. I hear a lot. I've been in Brussels for the past 22 years, and I've heard technology and technological innovation constantly. What I've heard much less is other type of innovation, which is not technological. That's the first important part. So all the social innovation that we have seen actually happening. For instance, farmers starting farmers markets and having direct processing and all sorts of other societal and social, the food council in many cities, etc. So that innovation has never been discussed. And then when it comes to resilience, which is the term that the UN and Jens also used, what I would like to hear more about is how to ensure that we get to have resilient farming systems. Because when you're facing drought, then you might have, it's not so easy with genetic engineering, but to a certain extent it's possible, you can have a plant that has a better chances to resist to a drought period. But we're not just facing droughts. We are facing erratic weather conditions. We're facing drought, we're facing floods, we're facing early rain, we're facing late frost. This is what climate change brings to us. And if you have a resilient system, a system where the focus is on soil organic matter, fertility, the stability of the system, then your plants, and if you input much more diversity in the field, then your field and your landscape will be much more resilient. That's something that, especially in Brussels, very, very few politicians talk about. And I would like to have, because it's scientifically speaking 100% solid, it's been shown that resilient systems react to shocks, climatic shocks, much better than monoculture or genetically identical plants, without even going into the debate. And then on NGTs, just one clarification. The debate right now is whether NGTs should be risk assessed, traced, and labeled or not. We're not talking about banning or not banning them. And even there, unfortunately, the debate is quite simple. It's been addressed in a very simplistic way by saying, we must have these technologies. Yes, we must have the technologies, we must trace them, we must label them, and then also see whether farmers want to use them or not and how effective they are.
At one point, Jens, I saw you nodding along. What's your take?
Yeah, my take, I'm very much in sync with Marco, what you're saying, that the resilience piece and basically the element of regenerative ag. So it's not only about producing more on the same amount of land, but it's a whole thinking process, an element about how can we produce more whilst we restore more in nature. And that's when you get immediately, of course, on the one hand side into the toolbox discussion, but on the other hand side into a crop system approach, where you not necessarily look at only one season, but you look at the entire crop rotation, crop cycles, and then we're coming back to cap and incentivization. So that's where the loop kind of closes.
Okay.
How can you drive through a policy framework and incentivization scheme the resilience adaptation through regenerative act? That's why I was basically nodding what you said.
I wanted to come back to where we started with the common agricultural policy. You mentioned the social element of it. That is it a social support system, or is it supposed to be kind of feeding into the competitiveness of the sector? What is its role? Where do you see the role of the CAP, of the common agricultural policy?
So even thinking to the income of farmers, they have a social dimension also, because when we look on the European treaty related to food, and the common agricultural policy, the objectives are to ensure enough food and affordable food for all citizens, and in parallel to be able also to provide a good and stable income for farmers. But if this income of farmers is ensured by only direct payments, the perception in society is that we give money to the farmers for nothing. And this is the big problem, in my opinion, for now at least 2 decades, the public debate about whether we should finance or not agriculture. As long as the situation is more complex. I remember when I was commissioner and I visited some areas in Finland, for example, or in the Nordic countries, they insisted that they want to keep farming in some areas, even if the productivity is not so high as, I don't know, in the Central Europe plains. So in a lot of our regions or member states, agriculture play also a social role in the sense that the agriculture activity keep farmers and keep people in some areas in which without agriculture it will be a social desert. So this is why we have to combine our tools in order, first of all, to give to the farmers the possibility to produce in all these areas and to look on different markets, because we talk about theoretical common market, but in fact in food sector we have different type of market. We have some local markets, we have some more larger market with the big distribution with supermarkets. We have an international market, and which is very important for the European Union, because without export, a lot of our sector will not be competitive, and we cannot keep this sector. So we should think to this reality and to combine social objectives with competitiveness and with good management of natural resources. For me, these are interconnected. We cannot have agriculture without fertile soil, without water, clean water and enough water, even without biodiversity, as we cannot have farming in Europe without farmers, not only in very productive areas, but also in mountain areas, in more remote regions. And we should think to our tools in order to keep some common rules for our European market, but to give them to the farmers the possibility to choose the specific adapted tools in order to keep their activity.
Yeah, Marco, the Commission in the past, or in member states, the Parliament, every time they try to increase environmental ambition with the Green Deal, with the Farm to Fork strategy, trying to tie the cap towards those objectives, it seems the ambition is always kind of hitting a political bit of a pressure. Yeah. How do you address that? It's something that I think everyone here mentioned, but when this vision hits politics, hits political reality, how do you push it forward?
The concern we have is precisely that this cap, as the previous one as well, is providing member states an incredible amount of power in terms of deciding how to spend the money. Member states have, not only they can decide whether to give 130 or 240 euros per hectare to farmers. It's almost twice as much. So there is already there only for hectare base without any string attached to that. But then they can also define the new conditionality, the new greening rules can be defined by member states. And unfortunately, looking at the history of the majority of member states, the way in which money has been spent, we don't have a lot of positive elements to say we can be sure that money will be given as an incentive to farmers to, again, transition and provide a farming production that is much more sustainable. But I wanted to come back a bit on a social aspect, which, as I said at the beginning, this proposal is actually trying to address, also via degressivity and capping, which are very highly hot political topics, which I don't think we have time to discuss now. But it's interesting, we need to also realize how different agriculture is. Commissioner Charles comes from Romania, I come from Italy, Jens, you come from Germany, I think. We have realities that are radically different, but we also within sectors. 65% of farmers produce 8,000 euros a year in terms of output. 3% produce more than 250,000, and 0.2% produces more than 500,000 per year in output. That reality, that divergent reality must be addressed. And in that sense, in the strategic dialogue, which I was part of, we reached an agreement, and the agreement was, let's give, as a social policy, a certain amount of payments within the cap to farmers that are not productive, that are not successful businesses, but just for the sake of ensuring that they remain in local areas and they populate rural areas. And I stand for that.
And unfortunately, we don't find this kind of indicators in the legislative proposal that the Commission put on the table. So this is another example of difference between a vision and what we put on the table when we come with legislative proposals.
It's almost like trying to compromise to do a little bit of everything. And you mentioned capping and degressivity, Marco. I remember the Commission speaking about looking even further ahead than 2028 towards the big enlargement that could happen with Ukraine. Capping and degressivity, it's a proposal that the Commission has tried to come forward with many times in the past. This time they're saying, oof, maybe it will help convince member states because of Ukrainian agriculture. Mr. Chalos, you've spoken before about the challenges of integrating Ukraine into the EU. It's a big agricultural powerhouse.
Yeah, the direct payment, it's not enough to be solved in order to have more clarity about how we'll integrate Ukraine. Ukraine is a big piece, and in my opinion, we have to think out of the box in the case of Ukraine. And to find a tailored and adapted solution working together with them. And in my opinion, we should start now to discuss about that. First of all, to see the reality on the spot and to have proper data about the situation on the spot, because Ukraine is not only about very big farms and big agri-food complex. There are also small and medium-sized farms. Ukraine lost a part of their international market, and Russia weaponized the food on this market. So we should help Ukraine to recover this market, and then to propose to them a long transition. And I think we can find a win-win solution, but if we approach this subject in a rational and pragmatic way, and not only with political fears. And because of political fears, we don't want to open sensitive subjects.
We're almost out of time, so I just wanted to turn to each of you. Name one change Brussels could make soon, quickly, that would make Europe's food system more secure, more sustainable, more competitive. What's the one change? Maybe starting with Jens.
From my point of view, regulatory simplification.
Marco.
Faster access to innovation.
From my point of view, is start having the guts to deal with demand-side policies, because the two dependencies we have from feed from South America and the US and synthetic fertilizers from Russia and Belarus are based on the enormous amount of animals that we need to feed, and we don't have the land to do it.
For me, it's to put in coherence our objective as strategic autonomy in the food sector and trade policy that we have. If we don't have coherence among that, we invest a lot of money in agriculture, but will not have a result.
Thank you, and that's all the time we have. Please remain seated. Up next, we'll have my colleague Jan Czajnski here on stage for a conversation with Andrius Kubilus, the EU Commissioner for Defense and Space. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you to all the panelists.